All right, hi everyone. My name is Anna, and tonight I'll provide tips for user interface design and artwork development. Thank you all for coming out tonight. Before I get into the talk, could you raise your hand if you're here for user interface design? Hey Trey, nice. And could you raise your hand if you're here for artwork advice? Just a few people. It's all right, looks like we've got a mixed crowd here tonight, so that's good to see. So, this presentation is geared towards beginner designers and artists, as well as programmers who wish to improve their programmer art. My aim tonight is to provide practical information you can use right away and hopefully inspire you to learn more. Different topics will be introduced with visual examples, and I'll also provide a list of helpful programs and resources at the end. For context, I have a strong background in graphic design and illustration. I also work full-time as a digital artist at Monkeystack. In this role, I create user interface designs, graphic design layouts, and digital artwork. In my spare time, I work on a game called Tech Hunter with a group called Split Symmetry. You might have seen us at AvCon or maybe even at PAX. What you'll see next is just a small sample of my work, just so you're familiar with what I do. User interface design for small screens, 2D artwork, user interface design for large screens, and 3D art. At the end of the presentation, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. So, let's get into it. Also, can people hear me? Is my voice level all right? Kind of? Quiet. All right, I'll try to yell a bit more. So, section 1, visual hierarchy. Before I discuss user interface design or artwork development, I'd like to discuss the importance of visual hierarchy. Visual hierarchy is a way to visually rank your design elements. Creating an effective visual hierarchy leads your users exactly to where you want them to go. I'll demonstrate how to create visual hierarchy in a moment. If you look at the screen now, you'll see a row of pink squares. Nothing exciting is happening here at the moment, but I could direct your attention around a specific square without telling you verbally by adjusting the visual hierarchy. This can be done by adjusting the following elements. Color, alignment, scale, contrast, depth, negative space, and shape. Although I didn't tell you to look at a specific square, your eyes would have looked around the screen. With these visual techniques in mind, we can begin to understand how games use visual hierarchy to convey meaning and importance to a user. For example, in Shadow of the Tomb Raider, climbable walls are indicated with a tonally light texture, as seen in this screenshot. The developers could have used any kind of visual direction here, but they made a deliberate decision using tone and texture to visually guide the players to where they want to go. While developing visual hierarchy in your design or artwork, also be mindful of user accessibility. Sometimes it's not enough to change the color of an object to convey meaning. To demonstrate this, let's examine this screenshot from a puzzle game called The Witness. You'll notice this block puzzle feels tonally flat. Understandably, the colorblind community noted there are some puzzles in this game which are impossible to solve. This puzzle might have needed more tonal contrast to feel more user-friendly. Ultimately, there are many ways to arrange visual work. I recommend using a combination of scale, contrast, and color to ensure every user understands your work in the same way. With this brief introduction to visual hierarchy, hopefully your design and artwork will be easier to plan and manage. Now, let's move on to user interface design. So, who here gets excited about user interface design? Yeah, my people! And who here finds it challenging? Yep. And who just doesn't know what it is? Good. All right, let's get into it. Hopefully some things will be cleared up if you are unsure. So, what is user interface design? User interface design relates to the interface between the game and the player, also known as UI design for short. If you're still unsure about what this refers to, think about main menus, inventory screens, and health bars. UI designs should be functional, attractive, and created with users in mind. The role of a good UI design is to provide information clearly and quickly. To achieve this, it's helpful to create a basic wireframe of your design before focusing on anything decorative. Create an underlying grid to neatly align elements and build a clear visual hierarchy. Inside your wireframe, you could also define interactive zones. Maybe menu-specific actions are always located in the top left zone, while combat-specific actions are always located in the bottom right zone. Organizing zones within your grid will help the player understand where they can find a specific set of actions as they play your game. Here's an example of the menu screen for Tech Hunter, the game I'm working on, with interactive zones mapped out. You'll notice there's consistent spacing around elements and visual flow lines are happening on the screen. And here's the same screen, built up a little more, but still part of the wireframe stage. While creating your wireframe, you should also consider how the design will be experienced. If your player is sitting on a couch, you might like to increase the size of your design so it's legible from a distance. If the player is sitting on a PC, consider scaling down your design elements. After developing your wireframe, and hopefully after getting some feedback from other people, you're ready to add visual elements to your design. But before doing so, you might like to consider where the user interface sits in your game. You could consider having non-diegetic UI, which sits on the screen and isn't really part of the game world, as these examples show. You can see the user interface lies flat on the screen. It's not really part of the game world. Or you could consider diegetic UI, which inhabits both a game story and space. In the example on the left, from Fallout 4, we can see the menu sits inside an electronic device on the user's hand. Meanwhile, in the example on the right, from Far Cry 2, we can see the player map is shown on a physical item. You could also try to incorporate both styles within your game. Also consider how you can reduce the visual impact of your design. Can a series of commands or words be represented with icons? Or can you add letter spacing so text feels easier to read? Also consider the art direction of your game. If the game has a tribal theme, consider giving the UI design boxes a rougher edge with a painted font. Or, if you're working on a cool science fiction game like Tech Hunter, using clean geometrical lines will give you that science fiction feeling. Also consider the target audience you're designing for. What kind of visuals are they already familiar with? Would they understand the symbols you're planning to use? For example, in our generation, my generation, we are really familiar with the floppy disk icon, but not everyone has grown up with floppy disks, so be careful of some of the symbols you choose. It might be helpful to research your target audience before working on any visuals. Overall, there's a lot to consider when developing a user interface design. Hopefully what I've covered will help you get started. I'll also provide some further reading and programs at the end. So let me know if I'm going too quickly with the slides. Okay, thanks. Section 3, artwork development. So who here likes to create artwork? Yeah, a lot of creative people in the room. It's good fun, I recommend it. So, how is artwork used in games? In game development, some artists will create concept art to develop ideas for a game. Other artists might work on polished art assets for in-game integration. Some artists will do both. This artwork could range from 2D to 3D and be visible in the game world or inside the user interface. Here's an example of concept art on the left and the final result on the right. Keep in mind, concept art can take many forms. It could look more polished, it could have color, whatever's suitable for the game you're working with and the team. Before creating your artwork, it's often helpful to give yourself a visual goal or some constraints. Building a mood board, a collection of images, will help narrow the visual direction of your game. Mood boards also help with guiding other artists and designers on your team to create a unified set of assets. You can build your mood board by looking at similar games you would like to make and looking up keywords or themes you want associated with your game. Keep in mind, you don't have to follow the sprawling exactly, but it's a good starting point for beginners. On the screen now is an example of a mood board. It doesn't have to be very polished. A team of artists and designers can begin to understand the visual direction of the game they're making by following this process. If applicable, you could also consider constraining your artwork to a grid by using common shapes between assets. Setting constraints like this really helps with achieving a distinct art direction for your game. In Tech Hunter, for example, I've used an underlying grid to create sets of alien symbols. Although there are many symbols, the designs feel connected as a group thanks to the consistency of using a grid. To develop artwork, you could begin to generate ideas by building silhouettes or drawing rough thumbnails. Looking at these forms and shapes will help you discover your strongest ideas. It's also a time-efficient process, as you can look at multiple possibilities before committing to anything. When you've chosen a strong idea and begin to build up your artwork, consider looking at your artwork from different angles and perspectives. This often helps with identifying odd areas or general mistakes. This screen shows an example of silhouette idea generation. I needed to make an alien pillar based on an existing 3D model in Tech Hunter. Drawing these shapes didn't take me a long time, but I got a pretty good idea of where I needed to take this pillar design before taking it into a 3D program. Depending on your artwork, you might also like to consider adding uneven detail and apply some textures. Visual imperfections often make an asset feel realistic or interesting. For example, in this 3D radio I worked on, you can see I've chipped away at the wood and etched away at the labeling. These are subtle details, but they help with the overall visual impact. Ultimately, artwork development is a broad topic. There's no right or wrong approach when creating artwork, but keeping these workflow techniques in mind can be helpful when you're starting out. I'll provide some further reading about artwork development in a moment. Hands up if you like to get stuff for free. Yeah, pretty much everyone. Excellent. So, you've learnt about visual hierarchy, user interface design, and artwork development. Now you might be wondering about which programs to use for which task. I've created a list featuring free programs and some paid ones to help you on your journey. Keep in mind, the categories I've set up are flexible. Technically, you could use one program for either task. I won't spend too long on each slide as this presentation will be uploaded online at some point. Programs for 2D artists. Programs for 3D artists. Blender in particular had a really good update in regards to their UI, so it's just beautiful to work with. Like, it's just amazing that it's free. I highly recommend it. Programs for user interface design. And programs for color blindness. Keep in mind, if you're going for a very specific look in your game and you really don't want to change your design or art, you could consider adding a colorblind mode in your game. Swap out any problematic assets where needed, just as an option. Further reading. And now we're at the end of the presentation. I hope what I've covered tonight was helpful to some of you in some way. And before I wrap this up, does anyone have any questions? Yes?
Sorry, I just had a quick question in regards to that colorblindness thing. What was that? Was that Cobus? I just couldn't read it.
Yes, Cobliss, Toolness, and WebAim. Some of these check text on color. Some of these just check two colors together. So they are pretty handy. No worries. Anyone else? Yes?
What's your favorite UI in a game?
Oh, that's a good one. I would have to say Horizon Zero Dawn. If you haven't played it already, it's got this beautiful tribal theme, but also with a science fiction flair. It's just gorgeous. I think Destiny 2 also has beautiful UI, but it's not very functional. Yeah?
To go further on that statement, how do you go about applying kind of like the world into the UI of the game?
So you mean for Tech Hunter?
Not just in general, but like you can see that through Tech Hunter, you obviously have a very strong understanding of that. What kind of steps do you do?
So to develop Tech Hunter's user interface, I do read up a lot on UX design, which is another topic entirely, which is all about how people experience the game, what they want to do first, what you need to show them. So I just put myself inside the player's mind, think about what I immediately want to get, and then I start blocking out, creating zones as you've seen in the design, and just take it from there. And as for the visuals, just looking at what other science fiction games have produced and just looking at a lot of technical pieces of equipment. Yeah. All right, anyone else? No? All right. Thank you all for listening. I really appreciate everyone coming out. It's my first talk, and thank you all.